Story 1. For me, it's everything happens for a reason. I understand that it's supposed to be comforting, but sometimes bad things just happen, and there's no grand cosmic lesson or hidden purpose behind them. It's like trying to put a motivational sticker on someone's suffering instead of just acknowledging it's difficult. Life is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes unfair, and that's okay to admit. What about you? What's the saying that drives you crazy? Story 2, Beeline. It's based on the old notion that once bees have their nectar, they immediately take the shortest, most direct path to the hive to deliver it. However, most people think of bees as constantly darting around, back and forth. Story 3. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. In my experience, words can have a bigger and longer-lasting effect on someone than anything that happens to them physically. Story 4. If you cannot explain it to a 5-year-old, you do not understand it yourself. For starters, Albert Einstein never said it. Then it is the sort of people who adopted it and love to quote that to attack and blame the person explaining instead of admitting they themselves are out of their depth or make no effort to understand or expect complicated concepts explained to them in a few sentences. It is a tool of ignorant individuals to feel smug about their ignorance. Besides, Einstein was a physicist whose theories were famously met with opposition. It makes absolutely no sense for him to utter anything like that. Did he not understand his own theories since he could not convince any one of them? If he ever said anything using similar words, it is much more likely the meaning would be completely different, that he believed the physical theories at their core should be really simple, and if they are not, it means there is more to uncover still to reach the true fundamental natural laws. Story 5. You cannot love someone else if you do not love yourself. I can love someone else very deeply and hate everything about myself. It may be harder to accept love, but giving love is still on the table. Story 6. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It started off appropriately, meaning something that's impossible to do. Now it's become the rallying cry for the "I'm rich and I'm going to deceive you" crowd. Story 7. In vino veritas, in wine there is truth, and derivatives thereof suggest the same idea. The assertion that intoxicated people are more likely to tell the truth is just nonsense. Drunk people talk nonsense, they make things up, and yes, sometimes they say things they wouldn't otherwise say. This doesn't mean those things are a true reflection of their honest thoughts. They're just a reflection of their uninhibited, foolish, drunken thoughts. Story 8. Go with the flow. My dad always told me this growing up when it came to things that I wasn't okay with, and it kind of messed me up because it wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that comfort is the arch-nemesis of personal growth. Be yourself and be proud of being different. Story 9. You'll find love when you are not looking, or there is someone out there for everybody. Not everyone gets a love story. Some people live and die alone. That's just life. Story 10. Work hard and you will get ahead. Worked for 42 years so far, did not get ahead. More like the truth. Work hard, and your boss's friend will get your promotion. Story 11. Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you will land among the stars. The moon is much closer than the stars, so you wouldn't make it to the stars if you can't make it to the moon, dummy. Story 12. If you want something done right, do it yourself. Popular meaning. No one knows how to do it the right way except you. Alternative meaning. If you are going to be pedantic, do it yourself. Story 13. If you cannot explain it simply, then you do not really understand it. It is an uninformed argument for not understanding something and trying to pretend the reason they do not understand it is because you are not explaining it simply. There is no simple way for me to explain some very complicated theory without the details getting lost. A good example is that someone a few weeks ago was saying, the cloud is just someone else's computer. And I was trying to explain that is not really true anymore given distributed processing, logical separation of data, and fabric infrastructure. Trying to explain how fabric infrastructure works to him was frustrating, and him continuing to say, but the data must be processed on someone's processor, as that is proof that we are just borrowing their computer, while I am trying to explain that even Amazon would have to do some very complex reverse engineering to figure it out because they intentionally do not want to know where the data is processed. There is no physical hardware linked directly to that virtual machine. It is abstracted away through several layers, and then trying to explain that means it could not possibly be summed up in one sentence. I once had a lady ask me why I do not just teach her what I know so she does not need me to consult for her company. I told her that she should go get her Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, and then Doctor of Philosophy in the subject, and then she would only need 15 years of additional experience in silicon manufacturing to be where I was when I started this career. It is not something you can learn in an afternoon, and if you think it could be, you really are uninformed. Story 14. I've got one. The phrase, everyone is different. That phrase annoys me because everyone knows it, but it seems so few people actually know what it means. Everyone is different means people aren't always going to agree with you politically, financially, philosophically, or religiously. I've seen so many people get angry at others for coming to a conclusion of their own that doesn't align with what the angry person believes. I'm Christian, and you're an atheist. It's time for me to explain to you why your way of thinking is wrong and why I'm right, or vice versa. Republicans and Democrats go at it, obviously, but not every Republican agrees with every other Republican, and the same goes for Democrats. I don't want to get started on racial stereotypes. We all have minds of our own, and I'm not going to sugarcoat things. Some people are hopelessly stupid, arrogant, etc. Thinking your opinion is the correct one is mostly normal. Thinking your opinion is the only one that should be taken into consideration. You'll run into some roadblocks with that logic. I could go on for quite some time, but using my phone to type this out is annoying. Story 15. Money doesn't buy happiness. People who say this have never really been poor. Money beyond what you need to live a comfortable life may not buy happiness. Story 16. Things happen for a reason. No, they don't. Bad things happen, good things happen, there is no rationality behind it. You are never sent something you cannot cope with, more nonsense from religious people. Story 17. You've got your work cut out for you? Shouldn't this mean it's easier? Like, here's your work. I already cut it out for you, so you just have to do the rest. Story 18. People get this saying wrong so many times. The correct saying is, I couldn't care less. If you could care less, it means that you do care, as there are other things you care less about. Story 19. Follow your heart. That's likely what got you into trouble in the first place. Use logic, knowledge, wisdom, and empathy. Your heart is the most treacherous thing you've got. Story 20. Do or do not. There is no try. I hate that line. Everything you do in life is you trying. Yeah, tough love and learning the hard way is a thing, but it's also mostly ridiculously ineffective to basically just say, do it. It's simple. Well, it obviously isn't, so I guess I better keep trying. Just a great movie, great character, line sounds cool, but I think it's just ridiculous in practice. You're always trying. You should keep always trying, and sometimes all you can do is try. Story 21. Friends come and go, but family is forever. I see this used more often in abusive families trying to push anyone who is trying to help the abuse victims away. The idea is good, but it is misused and misguided in its use. Story 22. The best and the brightest. People don't realize the origin of this phrase was coined by a journalist as an ironic and cynical description of the United States policymakers who instigated the disastrous events that were the Vietnam War. The term was most recently used this week by a Trump spokesman describing Trump's cabinet picks. Story 23. You can do anything you put your mind to. Or similarly, you can be anything you want to be. I'm sorry, not everyone is going to play in the National Basketball Association or be a rocket scientist. Story 24. If at first you do not succeed, try and try again. This directly contradicts another saying, the definition of insanity is repeatedly doing the same thing and expecting different results. Story 25. Keeping the peace in family is everything because these things are usually said to the victims in situations, and the perpetrator gets away with stuff like they normally do. Story 26. There is no bad advertisement. Yes, there is bad advertisement. Would you like to be Hitler? As popular but also as hated as him? Bad advertisement is worse than being forgotten. Story 27. Love means never having to say you're sorry is from a movie. However, I think many people believe it means if you love someone, you should never say sorry to them. Story 28. It is a quantum leap, for the quantum length is the smallest length there is. Following this logic, it would be the smallest possible progress. Story 29. This piggybacks on everything happens for a reason. It's all part of God's plan. I was in a horrific car accident 3 years ago with two of my kids. We are all alive and physically well now, but my daughter was badly injured, and my son and I both have significant psychological wreckage. Surgery, therapy, trauma, scars, pain, and my religious friends and family said this one a lot. If this was just part of God's plan for us. Why? Story 30. Violence doesn't solve anything, or violence is never the answer. I've always been baffled by these sayings because they're so clearly wrong in so many ways. Violence solves a lot of things and is definitely sometimes the answer. I understand that it might be easier to use these phrases to teach a 4-year-old to not fight because they can't grasp the nuance of when violence is necessary, but I've met adults that seem to sincerely believe these sayings and I don't get it. Story 31. You cannot reason a person out of a position he did not reason himself into in the first place. I have personal experience that showed me this is not always true. If it means to say it will be more difficult, maybe, but cannot, no. Secondly, if the person is allowed to reason themselves out of their previously held beliefs, then that is more common. Think of how many people, perhaps even including yourself, have had views in the past you have now renounced. Story 32. You shouldn't feel guilty about doing things that give you pleasure, particularly these days. This is often said about doing things that are seen as uncool or unpopular. But you shouldn't let popular opinion dictate the books you read, the movies or shows you watch, the music you listen to, or the hobbies you enjoy. Obviously, the statement above doesn't apply to doing things that give you pleasure but cause others harm. I shouldn't have to add this disclaimer, but Reddit, Story 33. People work hard for the things they get. I knew a guy in high school who smoked, did drugs, and said every slur known to man, and he somehow had every girl begging to be with him. Story 34. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. First, the tree gets cut down. It can't remember anything. But the whole tree chopping thing is pretty hard on the axe too. Being slammed into a tree headfirst, having your blade dull and get ground down over and over seems traumatic. Second, and most importantly, the axe isn't the abuser. The person swinging it is. The axe is also a victim. Story 35. Innocent until proven guilty. These types are all over true crime subreddits and repeat this line repeatedly. The principle of innocent until proven guilty is a legal construct to ensure unbiased legal representation and treatment of a suspect throughout their experience in the criminal justice system. The general public is not held to this same standard. It is perfectly normal and legal to have and share a personal opinion of someone's guilt or innocence. Story 36. This is more of an internet thing, but the customer is always right in matters of taste. The last part got added on somehow. The original saying is the customer is always right, which started as a counter to buyer beware and has nothing to do with supply and demand. Is it misguided? If you take it as gospel, will you allow difficult customers to walk all over you? Yes to both, but that doesn't mean there's an original, purer version. Story 37. Many of them. The customer is always right in matters of taste. Curiosity killed the cat, and satisfaction brought it back. Story 38. Like father, like son, or like mother, like daughter. My father was an abusive man with major anger issues, and these phrases made me feel hopeless about my future. I imagined being powerless to the doom of being like him awaiting me. It's not at all true. You have a choice, and I chose a decade of therapy and medication to unlearn his teachings. You can do it too. Story 39. It's not left versus right. It's top versus bottom. The sentiment is correct. Politics divides us where we should be united by class. However, the reality is that conservative politics is actively trying to ruin the lives of normal people, and while the lady is far from perfect, they are at least trying to fight for us. The phrase above just tells people it's okay to vote against your own best interest, and the interest of everyone else, so long as you know what your real problems are and continue to vote against any solution. Top versus bottom is right versus left. The very top has manipulated the very bottom into shooting themselves in the foot. Story 40. Treat others how they deserve to be treated. Treat them how they want to be treated. For all I know, you might be someone who wants to be treated poorly. Story 41. Treat people the way you want to be treated. No, many people do not want to be treated the way I do. For example, in a work setting, many people want to be treated with care. Not me. Don't avoid honesty. Be real and be honest with me. Otherwise, I won't take it seriously. Treat people the way they want to be treated. Story 42. Charity begins at home. I have never understood it as a concept, unless it actually means do not look to others to be generous, start with yourself, which makes much more sense. Story 43. Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. I despise this quote. Feel-good nonsense. A large group of cruel, committed people has historically had much greater impact on historical events than a small group of thoughtful, committed people. Too many to name. Nazis, Mongol hordes, Khmer Rouge, imperial armies, racists, sexists, the list could go on forever.